Welcome to my virtual diner. Pull up a seat at the counter. Get comfortable. Most shows talk about the people. I talk to them. This is Real America with me, Bridget Fetisi. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Good to see you this week. Some quick housekeeping. If you want to be called on, you need to be on Zoom, on camera, and you need to virtually raise your hand by clicking the reactions button. If you aren't on Zoom and want to be part of our virtual live audience right now or in the future, click the link in the description below to get the Zoom link below, or go to twoway.tv/BridgetZoom. The Zoom link is the same every week, every time, so put it in your calendar and save it and join us and be in our audience. The voice of God you're hearing or will hear is Cousin Maggie. Many of you already know her. Say hello, Maggie.
Hello.
She is my cousin. That would be weird if she wasn't, and co-producer. We make a lot of stuff together, like our shows Dumpster Fire and Walk-Ins Welcome, and all the other content you can find at Fetisi.com. Maggie will be monitoring the chat. If you have something to say and you raise your hand, Maggie will message you privately to find out what you'd like to talk about. She's going to help make sure we stay on topic. Don't be offended if she cuts you off and tells you we're going to move on. We can't guarantee we'll get to everyone, but we will do our best. Everyone knows my number one rule is don't be a dick, so try not to act like an anonymous troll on X. All right, let's get into it. We're talking therapy tonight. Mental health is all the rage, and we are decades... Sorry, I'm going to start that over again. Mental health is all the rage, and we are decades into the process by which therapeutic terminology, both classical and pop psychology, has infiltrated our language. Coping mechanism, trigger, trauma, boundaries, narcissism, gaslighting, self-care, BPD, splitting, mindfulness, PTSD. In just a couple of generations, we've gone from having no language other than shell shock for the men returning from war to literally everyone has PTSD from something. COVID was so hard, I have PTSD from watching Netflix for 6 months. But for all the lip service that mental health gets, it seems like we're getting crazier, more anxious, and more depressed. Between 2016 and 2022, antidepressant use increased by 66% in adolescents and young adults. Female adolescents, 12 to 17, in that same time, increased more than 130%. My friend Abigail Schreier talked about whether or not therapy is helping or hurting in her book, Bad Therapy. Jonathan Haidt tackled why these numbers are exploding amongst the youth in his book, The Anxious Generation. In 2023, approximately 18.7% of U.S. adults, about 47 million people, reported suffering from depression, with 17.8% currently having or being treated for it, according to a Gallup survey. Both mental illness in general and serious mental illness were highest among young women aged 18 to 25 in 2022. This past week, a woman named Naomi Best was recently fired from her therapy internship because of an article she wrote for the Wall Street Journal titled Santa Clara University's Crazy Idea of Human Sexuality. She is among a growing number of people who are calling out the field's ideological capture by critical theory. And if you don't know what that is, you aren't alone. The easiest description, unfortunately, is wokeness. My husband is a therapist, and not only is it a topic we discuss extensively in our home, but it's something I've talked to many people in the field of therapy about over the years on my podcast, Walk-Ins Welcome. People like Dr. Camila Ortiz or Jonathan Shedler. Dr. Jonathan Shedler and Dr. David Pewter are guests tonight. Full disclosure, I've been in therapy for decades, and it's no exaggeration to say it saved my life. But I had to find the right therapist. One therapist I saw would make me sit and talk to different versions of myself, my inner child, my higher self, the addict, who was quite familiar with my higher self, by the way. And I'd be like, so let me get this straight. Dividing myself up into multiple personalities is supposed to make me better? It never made sense to me. Needless to say, that relationship ended when he made me tell him one day, not night, my dreams, that would be really weird, my dreams from the perspective of my vagina. That's a true story and another story for another day. But what's really upsetting are the increasing stories I hear from people who go to a therapist after waiting and waiting for someone to even return their call, and the therapist judges them for their political beliefs, or for their feelings about vaccines or lockdowns. Most people are in pain, and it takes so much to get to the point where one can even ask for help. To have a bad first experience can do more harm than good and turn a person off from therapy forever. Tonight, we will hear from Dr. David Pewter about the current state of therapy. My husband found great value with with his podcast, Psychiatry and Psychotherapy, while training to be a therapist, and he practiced psychotherapy and psychiatry in California, Texas, and Florida. I also look forward to hearing from you about the United States of mental health. But before we get to all that, a quick word from our sponsor, Quest. Are you dealing with an HMO like I am? Do you care about your physical health? It's really important. If I want to get any sort of testing done to ensure I'm making sure my health is a priority, I have to wait weeks for an appointment to see my doctor, then get a referral from her and wait weeks more for an appointment with the specialist I needed to see. Quest helps you cut through all the insurance nonsense, I can't talk tonight, and get the tests you need when you need them. Quest offers over 150 of the same tests trusted by doctors, including diagnostics and specific ailments like STDs, chronic conditions like heart, liver, and kidney disease, as well as testing that is almost never covered by health insurance, like fertility and advanced women's hormone testing. Quest also offers broad packages of tests that go way beyond the standard tests you typically get in an annual medical checkup visit. Concierge medicine and functional medicine doctors charge thousands of dollars for these type of workups. Quest offers them for the price of a night out on the town. Your health and well-being is worth it. Getting in to see your doctor can take months. Instead, in just a few days, you can get an annual health profile from Quest that includes all the basics plus biometrics like height, weight, and blood pressure. When you finally do get in to see your doctor, you can share your results with him or her easily. Visit questhealth.com and use discount code REALMAY25 and get 20% off your purchase. That's questhealth.com, code REALMAY25 for 20% off. There's a link in the description below. Let's get into it, America. We're talking about therapy. I want to bring in Dr. David Pewter to talk first, and he'll be here through the whole entire episode. But this is a man, we've had him on Walk-Ins Welcome before. He's absolutely brilliant, and I'm really excited that you get to become aware of him if you're not. This is someone that I think has a very balanced perspective on what is and isn't therapy. Welcome to Real America, Dr. Pewter.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
It's there's a lot to cover. First of all, before we even get into it, I want people to have some kind of practical advice for how you would even screen for a therapist. How do you find a good therapist? They exist, right?
I think you probably start by asking friends, doctors, people who might have an inside scoop, who are the people around me that are therapists that have good reputation, and maybe you ask everyone and then write down that list. Problem is most people are too maybe anxious to ask around. So it can be hard. It can be hard to find a good therapist.
I mean, yeah, a lot of the time people will just, one of the kind of standard things I've noticed and heard is that you just never get a call back because therapists are so bombarded. And so oftentimes, if they don't have any space on their calendar, they just won't even call someone back. So you'll call dozens and dozens of therapists and not even get one single return call, which seems crazy in this industry, by the way.
That seems awful. It's really tough. Or a lot of insurance companies will list therapists as
Mhm.
if they are credentialed with that therapist, and they are not, and so maybe they were like decades ago, but then the insurance companies don't take them off. So you could be calling, down the list of your insurance company, and no one's going to reply if they're not accepting that insurance, if that's how you lead. So
Right.
I think what I would say is when you call, you know, you're you're just meeting this person, be polite, you know, try to set up an initial appointment, and then try to get you know, your initial impression and kind of a gut feeling. Don't just go with the first therapist that you meet. Um, Consider it like, you're meeting a stranger, and do you connect with this person? Do they listen well? Are they kind of projecting their own ideas on you? Are they asking you really strange questions? Can they tell when maybe you don't want to answer a question, or are they reading your nonverbal cues? Like, are they listening well? And we can get more into this. I think one of the things I wanted to introduce to your audience is this idea of reflective function. And so when we think about what are the best therapists, they're high in this ability to introspect on their own life, actually. But that's like really hard. Like, you can't just tell that from the get-go.
Right.
Um, so, how well are they at receiving feedback? How well are they at hearing from you when you disagree with them? These might give you clues into their reflective function. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah,
What did you think? Did you see the Naomi Best? Did you read the Wall Street Journal piece?
I did. And I was very surprised. So, for those of you who haven't read it, who are listening in, basically in this program she was in, they were asking the students to write like very extensive sexual, you know, ex- from the first sexual experience all the way forward to today. It's like, really? I'm going to turn that into my teacher who, like, I don't have like a relationship with this person. This person isn't someone that I've met with one on one. They're not in a professional relationship with me. I mean, even with my patients, like, I would not expect them to tell me all of that, you know, like, ever. Like, it's up
Yeah.
to them how much they want to share. And I would expect them to want to build a trusting relationship for maybe 6 months to a year before they start to share things that are very vulnerable. And
Yeah.
so when I when I read that, I was like, oh, what? And then she also talks about how they were watching like sadomasochistic stuff, and then the teacher was kind of giving some off jokes, and yeah, it's bizarre.
By the way, it wasn't even just writing the, entire sexual history from when you first masturbated to whatever you ever did. It was also uploading loading it to like a third party server. It wasn't even like turn this in to your teacher, which in and of itself is crazy. To me, uploading all that information, like everything's been hacked,
Yeah.
everything. Who that seems crazy to me too. How do you I don't know how one trains for this because of course you have to be comfortable with all kinds of things that would be considered kinks or whatever the terminology is in your field. So how do generally would you train for that?
And this is where it's kind of complicated, because you want to talk to students about sexual things. They're going to feel uncomfortable. Um, but I don't necessarily, I never elicited from any of my students, like, tell me your stories. Uh, in particular, like, that's so usually how we go about training is a combination of didactics, supervision, and then your own personal therapy. And I think that it's weird to require personal therapy, because I feel like it has to be voluntary,
Mhm.
because and I would say the only place that is not voluntary is more of like a psychoanalytic school. If you want to be a psychoanalyst, you have to go through and be analyzed yourself. Like, that's part of what you're signing up for. Um, so I think a lot of that would best be taken processed one on one with the supervisor as you have clients that bring it forward, because our clients do talk to us about sexuality all the time. Um,
Yeah,
and good.
no, go on. It reminds me a lot of in 12 step there's a fourth step inventory that you take, and it's like everything you resent and everyone you resent, and there's a lot of controversy around how you often go through this with a sponsor, or you can go through it with someone you trust, like a therapist for instance. But I had a great sponsor when I went through this because we would hit something where it was, it's usually it ends up like the end is looking at what your part is. The reason this is controversial is when there's something like, for example, sexual assault or abuse. Or you've been molested as a kid. That's not your fault. Your part would be looking at like, how is this perpetuated in your life? But I would get to these things, and I had a great sponsor who was like, above my pay grade, take that to a therapist. Like when we would hit trauma, she was smart enough to know that this was something I had to go work on with a therapist. And also, she was like, I'm just a random person in a room, of
Hmm.
AA, like that. She didn't necessarily want to know all this stuff. So it is bizarre to me that you would, as a teacher, be asking for these, like, I mean, and we're talking about something where you're trying to recover and you do a
Yeah.
whole like sex inventory in
Yeah.
recovery. But I never took that to just like a stranger. I can imagine being very um uncomfortable and vulnerable. But then according to her today, many of the students came out and said that they didn't feel that anything that they were asked to do was out of the ordinary, and the way
Mm.
that she's kind of presented it is not accurate.
Well, time will tell, right? And I'm sure there's another side of a story, as there always is. And that's part, and I can almost like see what the faculty would say, in
Yeah.
my mind, because I've been faculty, and it's like, hey, we're training you, and most patients talk about sexual things. Like you need to become comfortable talking about sexual things. Um, and I think the problem is that training programs are trying to get 100 people through a year rather than like, hey, there's an individual here who maybe when they have trauma, it's like dissociating and actually traumatizing to talk to a wall of like a still face.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, a lot of kids will tell me, or a lot of adults will tell me when they told their parents about some sexual trauma, their parents either got angry at them or they just went completely flat and didn't say anything and never talked about it again. So imagine you've gone through something traumatic. You want to talk to someone who is able to empathize, listen, help you think about it in new ways, reduce your internal guilt. That's one of the
Hmm.
biggest things about trauma therapy. And is if you still feel guilty about this thing, it's going to be really hard for your brain to resolve it. So something called cognitive processing therapy really attacks the guilt over and over again.
Mm. Do you think one thing that I do agree with her, and I think a lot of people are trying to move the goalposts a little bit from the point that she's making in her essay with a lot of the other things that she was asked to do. And I witnessed, even watching my husband go through his master's program, there has been ideological capture of this institution, along with a lot of you know, the like all the licensing boards and whatnot. What is your feeling on this?
I think that um
Can
there's
you
an
even be honest about it?
I think that there's um people who have been very hurt by different um situations. Okay, let me think about how to be honest about it while still, you know,
Not losing your
well,
license.
here's the thing
The
is like
irony.
the there could be extremes on both sides. And I would and it leads to a more difficult conversation, which is around reflective function and nuance. Okay. So if I have someone come in and they feel like I've had patients who feel like the system is rigged against them, and sometimes it is. And
Hmm.
sometimes I've had patients who come in who have more of their personality is organized around some degree of paranoia that the system is against them. And so sometimes it's like, how do I tease out what is truth and what is not truth? And I think the problem that I see is a lot of times we just put these blanket solutions on things like, oh, your partner is a narcissist. And that's actually a very low reflective function thing to say as a therapist. And so, um, what we want to do is we want to increase the reflectiveness and expansiveness and think about the multiplicity of influences that are leading to a situation happening. And anytime we have very monolithic, easy to say tribal solutions, we're probably wrong.
It's interesting too because there seems to be, I think women get the benefit of therapy. There, you look in your field, it's predominantly female. There, women generally, not to just throw everyone into categories, but we speak in kind of feelings. Why we're always in the bathrooms talking about, what are we doing in the bathroom? We're pumping each other up and telling each other to get out there and tell him to fuck off or whatever. Like, I think women are better at talking about their feelings, expressing them, and men. The reason I even wanted to do this episode this week was last week a man was saying that he had kind of poo-pooed therapy and now he's realizing, like, he was like, maybe the minivan isn't so bad. Maybe I should look into therapy to get over some of this unresolved stuff I have from my being a child of multiple divorces. And I feel like men in particular, then you have kind of on a lot of side to men when they want to seek therapy. And then you are added to that with it being captured ideologically by people who maybe haven't even lived that much life. They're going right from, their like whatever their kind of ideology was in college directly into therapy. And also we see this kind of split politically in male and female. How do we help the men? That's my long way of asking. What are your thoughts on that, and how are the men doing? And weirdly,
Men,
the women aren't doing well either, based on all the numbers I read at the top of this episode.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people are not going to good therapy or therapy, period.
Is
Um,
right. That's my question. Is it even therapy?
a lot of a lot of therapy. I mean, I just posted the other day, how much in your training did you get trained on things like transference, countertransference, personality, different personality types. And one person was like, all we got trained on is CBT. And I had a patient come in today and he said, hey, yeah, I've been to a couple therapists and all they do is teach me how to breathe when I'm anxious.
Mm,
And I'm like thinking to myself, okay, so he really hasn't done much therapy. Like he's been given one coping skill over and over by a bunch of therapists. That's very easy to teach. It's so yeah, there's a lot of nuance. And okay, men, how are men doing? Men are not doing well. They're four times more likely to end their life. And I have patients, male and female, whose fathers ended up ending their life, and it is catastrophic. It is awful. There's a ripple effect that is just so painful. Um, but I want to get away. Is it only men or is it people with a more avoidant attachment style? Because I think people who avoid connectedness or connection or vulnerability because it's safer, maybe because early on in their life it was safer to be a little bit more like distant. Those are people who will avoid therapy but maybe need it the most. And a lot of them have very complex trauma and a lot of work to do. And so I see this. I have female clients who it's like the first session you can tell like they did not come here easily. It took the family sometimes a couple years to get them into treatment, And so there's a large avoidance of looking at our inner world. And a lot of people do a lot of things to try to avoid sitting in the painful stuff.
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, should we hear from a man?
Yes, actually, Jack has something to say about this very topic. So, Jack, I'm going to bring you up and ask you to unmute here. And there we go.
You hear me?
Hi, Jack.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, this is actually pretty timely. So, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the YouTuber Dr. K. He's a doctor who talks to he runs this channel called Healthy Gamer, and he talks a lot about these topics. But in one of his videos, it's called Why Therapy Sucks for Men. And I had
Mm.
recently watched it, and it kind of prompted this question. And he claims that men oftentimes have a harder time, one, identifying their feelings, and two, communicating them properly than women. And that was like the first part of this question. Doctor, I wonder if you've had experience with that in the past, and kind of like, is it even really useful for men? Let's just take if you have a serious like mental disorder, PTSD aside, right? Because I can see the argument for that. But for maybe your average male who's thinking they need some help and it's separate from like a serious traumatic event.
Yeah, it's harder. It's harder. Uh, it's there. I think there's more stigma for men to seek treatment. I think it was harder for me the first time to call. I remember I had the person that I was going to call. It took me about 4 months. I remember literally thinking about it every week, like, oh, I should call, I should call. And this is when I was a resident, psychiatry resident, and my supervisor was like, you should do it to be a better therapist, a better psychiatrist. And so I had like that ego out that, I'm doing this to be a better therapist, not because I need a therapist.
The
But
loophole.
yeah, I think it is harder. But I would say one interesting finding is in reflective function, it's equal between male and females. So reflective function is a complicated word describing like how we can conceptualize our own internal world and other people's external world and the why of why things happened when we were younger. And so men and women are equal in that. So it's more
Interesting.
of the avoidant attachment that leads to it. But tell me, Jack, can I ask you a
Uh,
question? Is it harder for
Sure.
you to seek treatment? Like, have you thought maybe I should seek
Oh
treatment?
boy. I'm about to offend a lot of people here. No, and I'm a pretty religious person. To me, therapy is going to as a man, I see being vulnerable as like pretty bad and like frowned upon. So, things that worked best for me years ago when I had big struggles was I started finally exercising regularly, getting my diet in order, and having a good social group. And all of those things, like, and then going back to church and going to confession. I'm a Catholic. So, like, all of those things, like, dramatically increased my mental health. So, I mean, are there things? Maybe, but like, and this is where I'm like, if I wanted to, I just don't see it as really valuable. And if I wanted to kind of like, this is kind of the second part of my question. I've seen a lot of anecdotes, especially with men and female therapists, and it not going very well,
Hmm.
especially when they talk about sensitive topics like relationships with other women, mainly like their mom or their girlfriends or their wives. And again, this is all anecdotal because I've also had friends who've had great experiences in therapy and their men, that their female therapists would get like super defensive, like when they were talking about other women.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like, I
So
wonder,
I've never considered it.
defensive in what way, I wonder. Yeah, I don't know.
Just like get him, sister. I don't know why I'm
A
doing
couple,
that all
the
day.
one I had seen that I can remember was like, talking like toxic relationships with their mom, and like their mom not loving them, and the therapist like, oh, well, of course your mom loves you.
Yeah.
Like,
We,
okay,
I had a
well,
friend
not
who kept
helpful. Like,
I had
Okay.
I had a friend who kept going and they kept trying to blame it on their mom. And even if it was their mom's fault, my friend was not able, this was a female. She wasn't able to see that and also just didn't agree and kept saying, "Hey, this isn't all about my mom." And this therapist just refused to acknowledge what she was saying
like
and
the
hear her
roast.
and kept on trying to blame her mom for everything. And she finally ended up having to leave the therapist.
Yeah. It's Jack, I think your exercise, your diet, your religious activities, those are all huge strengths and your close friendships. And if you didn't have a reason to go to therapy, that something that was like really distressing you, bothering you, then I would say, yeah, don't go to therapy.
I think a lot of men, especially, though, they might jump straight to therapy when they haven't done those other things yet. And I think it's kind of, I don't know, but
Isn't it the
Well,
big three, right? They call it like sleep, exercise, and diet. Those are the big three that you kind of check in with and in terms of
these are things I talk to patients about. So sometimes they come to me and they hear the same thing maybe and they're like, "Oh, okay." But I mean, I think it's awesome that you've been able to do those, and you look like you're in shape, and it looks like you're doing well. Which begs the question though, why are we here? You know, like what is that curiosity that led to you coming into this session?
Oh, I was just watching Mark Halperin and he recommended watching Bridget. And I was like, oh, you know what? I have some more free time today. So, and it was talking about therapy. And I had just watched this YouTube
Okay.
video about it. And like I said, I'm kind of like a skeptic when it comes to men and therapy by and large. That's kind of why it prompted my interest.
I mean, I don't think my own husband would be mad at me for admitting that sometimes he's like, therapy. And he's a therapist. Like he too sometimes wrestles with the effectiveness of it. And he himself is a therapist. And I don't know, Dr. Pewter, do you ever wrestle with that? Or do you feel like, this is like the one of the things that I will say to you, Jack, and I'm curious. This is something someone said to me. And I'm not a therapist. This is just something that someone said to me, and I was like, I'm fine. I'm sleeping well. I'm doing great. And and I had this. He was just a very old, wise friend in my life, and he goes, "That's cool. How's everyone around you doing?" And I was like, "That's a really great question." Because they weren't actually doing that well. So I feel like that's a question that I think about a lot too. I'm not saying this in regards to you. I'm just saying, no, I am asking you, how's everyone around you doing?
I mean, I have friends who've been in therapy and I try not to judge them, but I do. I
Hmm.
can't help it.
Hmm.
But I don't know all their past and everything. And usually I think I'm really blessed. So I'll
You
keep it
judge
at
them
that.
for being like weak, or can I ask you what the judgment is about?
I think we have, and part of that is a backlash to what I've seen as like the over effeminization of society, right?
The
So that's part of
longhouse.
it.
Yeah.
Like, especially with men, like I think there needs to be a return to more stoicism among men. So part of that's
Mm.
just a backlash thing, right? And that I can't help feeling. I think it's probably better than what it was like a long time ago. I mean, I'm not even 30 yet, so um, bottling everything up and taking it out on your significant other or yourself is probably not good either. But
Hmm.
so part of it's my own bias and kind of swinging in the other direction. Like, no, men are men and women are women, and men should probably be a little more stoic,
Well, I think, you know, if you actually read Stoic philosophy, it's not that they aren't against emotion.
right?
They're actually practicing um, doing difficult things. Like for example, one Stoic practice I like is just eating very simple food for a day, right? And seeing what comes up. Or instead of needing to go to a beach to enjoy the beach, close your eyes and see if you can enjoy just being in your own head. Um, or, you know, Marcus Aurelius, like imagine your wife thinks you're dying and goes off with your general to get married, and then you don't die, you know, and then how do you deal with that conflict? And he actually like was very what seemed forgiving despite the general being killed and brought to him. So I think that there's a mixture of like therapy is not maybe what you think it is. I think when it's done well. And I think that before you judge your friends, you should be like, hey, help me understand, you know, what is your life like and what is it like to be inside of your head and your thoughts? Because you may be a fairly well-grounded person, but you know, like I had a male patient today who, and you would never know this unless you like sat with them for hours, but his internal um, negative voice keeps him from making any friends,
Mhm.
okay, or going out to the gym, you know. So it's like when that level of internal negative voices are there, right? It makes sense for someone like that to get someone's professional help that's been like trained, and not it doesn't weird me out. Like nothing really throws me off at this point. Okay. And I would also say, okay, if you have judgmentalness towards you, are you married yet?
Yeah, not yet.
Okay. In a lot of
Okay.
bro man culture, um, because I'm aware, I'm on TikTok sometimes, YouTube, I watch these kind of things. There's this thought that you could just never show any vulnerability to your wife and just keep it all in, bear the burden, you know? And And who's teaching this? Are those people in thriving marriages? Most of them are not. Most of
A
them
good
are
point.
dating multiple women. They're Peter Pan syndrome, essentially. Okay. They're super avoidant attachment, maybe a little bit narcissistic, psychopathic. If, one of the things of psychopathy is to have, uh, a history of hundreds of partners, right? So, and then what is the angle that they're trying to like lure you in to follow them? Like, what's their end goal? What do they get from that? And sometimes it's like money. So, before you like, my challenge to you would be twofold. One is really dive in with your friends unjudgmentally and try to put some of that aside. And number two, read some emotionally focused therapy, like by Sue Johnson. I'd interviewed her on my podcast, and I asked her the same question that you asked, like, should men restrain themselves from sharing vulnerably? And I actually think to build a thriving marriage, you have to be truthful and honest and share what's going on inside of you. And with restraint, not always,
Right.
but
Reciprocal vulnerability, though, right? That's like the key in a
well,
relationship.
marriage is
Or,
different than dating, right? Dating is kind of like
fair enough.
maybe uh, dating is a different game. But if you want a plant to grow, you're kind and generous to your spouse, and sometimes you share from what's going on inside of you. I don't think that's feminine. I'm a pretty masculine person, D1 athlete, power lifter, and I go to work every day. And I think a lot of the work that I do as a therapist is extremely masculine. Like when you're working in the midst of trauma,
That's good to
it's
hear.
it's like when you get to someone when they're actually talking about something where they dissociated in the midst of like a really significant trauma, you will feel exactly what it feels like to have 350 pounds on your back in a squat. That tendency to dissociate, to want to shut down, that is in the room. I'm feeling that with my people. And I have to ground myself and not dissociate, go flat faced, and I have to be present with them. And that takes a level of more mental fortitude that like athletics and everything has taught me in my life, all the struggles that I've been through and facing my own, so to speak, demons.
That's
So
You definitely convinced me a little bit, doctor. And I hope there's more therapists like you for men. Seriously. We need
Henry
it. So
Nouwen is a great example of a Catholic who appreciated therapy. Have you read any Henry Nouwen?
I haven't, but I will have to.
Okay. Return of the Prodigal Son. Read that one. He actually trained, I think, as a therapist in Menninger. He was a Harvard professor, very gifted writer. So as a Catholic, that one might be interesting to you.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you,
Jack.
guys.
Thank you, Jack.
Thanks for being here. Who we got, Mag?
All right. I'm going to bring up Craig next. Going to talk a little bit about his experience with therapy. I need you to unmute there, Craig.
That's why I said knock knock. So you
There we
couldn't
go.
hear me. Knock knock, you can't hear me. Anyway, I've spoken to you before, Bridget. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Dr. Kruder, David, are you psychiatrist or psychologist? I missed the beginning of the call. Sorry.
I'm a psychiatrist, but
Okay, psychiatrist.
I do psychotherapy as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'll start like this. 20 years ago, the day before Memorial Day this year, I had a car accident. I'm gonna lose my lower limb amputee, and I had severe brain injury, traumatic brain injury, and I survived. And this 20th anniversary has been the hardest for me because it's like I said goodbye to that Craig 20 years ago, So
Mhm.
this is definitely my second life. It's I call it my bonus life with my son because he's a Super Mario fan, and it's my bonus life, Anyway, I think I got pulled together again. Sorry. So
No,
first
but
on stoicism.
you could see how even talking about this, I mean, this was a
Yeah.
very life-changing event for you.
Yeah.
You have a son, you have
Yeah.
humor with your son, and
Yeah.
that's a strength of yours. And I
Um,
think that your ability to see that life, it's like there's a gift, right?
yeah.
In a second chance, in a second thing. So yeah, it was awful. It was absolutely horrific.
So
And
I've had,
yeah.
I have what dysthymia, which is what is it? PDD or PPD, I forget what it is. Anyway, basically, it's a low-level depression that occasionally dips into major depression. Um, and I might have had symptoms before I had the accident, but I was definitely after the accident in major depression almost immediately. Life change, brain injury, all that kind of stuff. Who knows what caused what? But it was hard. I couldn't get out of bed. So and before that, the year 2000, so before I had my 5 years before my accident, my mom had a very bad experience with major depression, and she couldn't get out of bed, and I just couldn't understand that. It didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you mean you can't get out of bed? And then I went through it myself, and I'm like, it's because you feel like you failed at everything you're gonna try that entire day before you get out of bed. And the word I wanted to eventually talk to you about is that what I've learned. I think that's the best thing I learned from my therapist, Marilyn, who I see every 2 weeks, is that uh, I believe the most important story told is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. And to me, Marilyn has said to me that she is the one who helps me write that story, helps me constantly rewrite that story, because it's been rewritten a bunch of times, but it's always been kind of the same story, right? And I think we all kind of have that going on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
think about how, like, even labeling this as like the Super Mario Second Life, I think you said.
yeah.
Um,
Bonus life.
but that's being truthful with yourself as well, because you didn't pass away, you didn't die, you got to see your son grow up. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And
He's only
so
10, and
yeah.
he's taught me the one thing, the most important thing he taught me is that he's a complete know-it-all, which I kind of bothers me. And I'm like, that must mean I'm a complete know-it-all, because I'm pretty sure he learned it from me. So we're both complete know-it-alls, which is kind of it's good to have a
Well,
son to teach you these
or
things about yourself.
or sometimes the confidence of a
Yeah,
son comes from your attunement as a parent. So if you're
yeah.
every day attuning to them, listening to them, caring about what they say, then they're going to talk about what they care about, and they're going to tell you stuff with confidence, right? So that could be a
Yeah.
good thing.
So that's I want to think about stoicism. I've been through a lot of philosophy since the accident. Evolutionary psychiatry made a lot of sense to me. Randy Nesse, I don't know if you're familiar with him, and his book. So I can't remember the name of it right now, but Nesse, Randy Nesse.
Yep.
Um, uh, and the evolutionary explanation behind depression makes sense to me. I mean, I think we can make anything can make sense to us if we talk about it long enough.
Yep.
But um, we don't know ourselves. So ultimately, what I'm saying to you is that we're all basically strangers to ourselves. And recently with Marilyn, I've been telling her that we should all be assigned a therapist at birth.
Okay.
And because if you have someone there who is not necessarily involved with your life every day, but hears you every so often and is able to give you feedback occasionally to help you
Yep.
understand what you don't understand about yourself. I mean, granted, I have a wife now, and she kind of does that for me, but she kind of just calls me the P word most of the time.
Well,
Anyway,
Craig, I'm gonna jump in here.
yeah,
Now we're not doing therapy or anything, of course, but what you said actually speaks to our prior person who was on here.
yeah,
He was saying he had some judgment towards a friend.
yeah,
You
yeah,
said you had some judgment towards your mother. Um, Something happened in your life that changed your ability to empathize with your mother. It changed your ability to basically help, in a way, see her and her struggles in a new light, right?
yeah,
And your judgment was taken away. It was painful for you to lose that ability to or you're essentially like a wounded healer of sorts, right? Because you've gone through it, you've gone through a lot. You can listen in new ways, you can understand people in new ways. And so I think that's part of your superpower, Craig. And I'm just gonna say that. And it's very nice to meet you.
Nice to
nice to
meet
meet you as
nice,
well.
nice to see you, Craig. Thank you for sharing.
Thank
and
you,
Hey
Craig.
being so
guys,
open.
be well.
Okay. And next, I'm going to bring up Jen, who I think had an interesting point here. I just asked you to unmute, Jen.
Yeah, okay. I've been concerned about how many times I'm hearing in the news and in social media, people labeling others as narcissists. I kind of feel like people.
You're good company, Jen. You're in good company.
I call everyone a narcissist. No, I'm just kidding.
Character flaw of being selfish, but I think narcissism really requires a diagnosis. You know, it's not just everybody who you don't like. You know,
Jen, it's so much more fun though whenever you break up or have like a bad relationship go wrong, just to go all bad on them, right? It's like finding the parsing out the nuance of like, here was a strength, here was a weakness, here's something good that I took away, but here's something that this person had a failing in. Absolutely, Jen. This is a big issue. I talk about this actually. Me and Dr. Jonathan Shedler did an episode on narcissism, and we kind of dispel some of the myths of it. And I think also it's clickbait at this point.
yeah.
Most downloaded podcast episodes I have are on narcissism and borderline personality disorder. Okay.
If I didn't hear the words cognitive dissonance and narcissism ever again, I'd be very, very happy. There are so many folk who, you know, maybe they took a couple of psychology classes, or maybe they even thought about pursuing a major in psychology. And now they just feel free to, you know, go out there and tell everybody what's wrong with them.
You know, so I did a post the other day on narcissism, and I said, here are all the character qualities that you can develop to not be a narcissist. And if you actually look at the list, it's like, it's a good list. It's like things to aspire towards. It's like treating other people as equals. You know, don't put yourself not in a better place than other people. I mean, really spiritual truths that have been told in every religion, right? Like be kind to the stranger, be generous to and hospitable to the person that comes to visit. Don't think of yourself as more important than other people. So I think there's general things that we can learn from it, but I think there's so many categories that make sense of people in other ways than narcissist. One is hyperthymia. Have you ever heard of that one?
Yeah.
Theodore Roosevelt had hyperthymia. It's just a high level of energy, executing all the time. Doesn't need as much sleep, just going. Another one is and Bridget, you could have hyperthymia, and that could be like, if you have a little bit of bipolar in your family, you might have a higher chance of having hyperthymia actually.
It was the opposite. Would that be hypo?
No, unfortunately it has
You just want to sleep all the time.
it's called dysthymia. But if your personality is very critical towards yourself, it could be something we call like more of a depressive personality style. I don't like seeing any of these things as disorders. What happened is that in the DSM, they said, okay, we're only going to give these to people who have really bad personalities, and it kind of ruined personality research for the next decades. Because really, we all have a personality style. I like to look at it as the big five. You know, where are you lying on things like openness? If you're high openness, like you, Jen, I can see your high openness. You're probably artistic. If you're high extroversion, like Bridget, you're probably like you really like to be around other people. You're just like the life of the party, right? High energy.
Not that.
No, I said that about Bridget here.
High energy, but yeah, no, I did take Jordan Peterson's the personality test that he has online with those, you know, 5 attributes. So
okay.
Someone in our comments, actually, before we even came on, they were talking about how Jordan Peterson and another woman basically think the entire field of therapy has been, I'm trying to find the exact comment that they made, has been captured by Miriam Grossman and Jordan Peterson both seem to believe their profession has given itself wholesale to the woke religion, which is a damn shame. We need sane normie psych help worse than ever.
Yeah, and I think Jordan Peterson is, when he's making those comments, is he's not necessarily speaking globally, but very often really targeting Canada, who basically have stripped him of his, or close to his, ability by his professional organization coming up against him because of his thoughts. So
see, but with this kind of line of thinking, and I think it's not always it's a harder thing to do, to say, it's not all black and white, right?
Right.
There's shades of gray. I know a lot of therapists um, who are not going to bring up politics in session. They're not going to push a child to have, you know, uh, more views that are not maybe the parents' views. They're going to be respectful of different people's religions and cultures. And that's what I did with the first guy we had on, is I tried to connect with him over kind of a bridge connection. It's like, hey, I've read broadly, so I know different authors, and here's one that you might kind of bridge you into a worldview that's uh,
Yeah.
that I think is very helpful for thriving long term. So I think not everyone has gone into a place of what I would consider bad therapy. There are some, um, but the examples of bad therapy that I have are like therapists projecting their own issues onto their patients in a way that's very harmful to the patient, and trying to push the patients towards something that aligns more with their own life, often because they have never done their own work on their own life, right? And so this is where I think reflective function is kind of a good barometer for their ability to with nuance look at their childhood, look at their own life. Can they articulate the why of things in a complex way? Go ahead, Bridget.
Oh, nothing. I was just having a thought about how narcissism and personality disorder and all those things are so clickbaity, and how it adds to this the kind of feeling that the therapeutic language has taken over everything. And then it's one of those things that all these words, like so many words in our culture now, have just lost all meaning.
Yeah. I really want this all to be in the hands of good therapists and not in the hands of everybody who took a college course.
Well, I want to ask a little bit, Dr. Pewter, how many therapists do you know who you would recommend to people that you love? Like, do you have, I mean, I guess because of your working in
because of
cohorts and stuff like that, you know a lot of good
yeah.
therapists, but would you say the average person would know
average
a
person would not.
plethora of good therapists?
Probably not. And then also, like, when I have someone come to me who needs a therapist, it's like, okay, how much can you afford? Because unfortunately, good therapists can charge a premium, and often do. So, and then what state is the
Right,
person coming to me
licensing.
in? Because there's a lot of states I don't know anyone, and a good
Right,
therapist won't want to practice across state lines because it puts them at risk, because their malpractice might not cover it.
right.
And so, yeah, but I would say, like, how many good therapists do I know? Um, it's not as many as you might imagine, despite all of my, like,
Connections.
connections. Yeah.
That's disheartening. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for tuning in. I love the Northern Lights.
Yeah.
It's giving me a dreamy vibe.
Okay, well, this kind of goes along in those lines. I'm going to bring up Ben. And he was actually had something to say about online therapy.
Good point.
There we go.
Yeah, so similar to, I think his name was Jack earlier, I would maybe fall on the more conservative, well, definitely more on the conservative side. I don't like the term right wing or even Republican. Republican's a job title in my opinion. But definitely was having a lot of struggles, and to the point where I think my wife was like, you need to go talk to someone. And I think that for me is what kind of, it almost got worse, because it's like, you don't know who to talk to. So you go to what you go to online, and yeah, I guess part of it is more to share my experience, but also to ask your opinion or thoughts on the kind of the app, if I want to make up a word, appification of things like therapy, in the same way that, you can get an app for this, to get this delivered to you, get that delivered to you, versus going into person. Because for me, it was probably the disaster in terms of you get paired up with someone, they don't know anything about you. It was, I want to say it was close to a few $100s a session. And each session, it was just, there was no connection, and I understand the principle of like, hey, you got to find till you match, find till you match. But it's like, okay, but every session you do, you see another 200, 300, I forget what it was at this point, leave your bank account, and you feel worse than you did before, because then for me at least, contributed more to the loneliness, the isolation, is this even worth it? Because now you have even less money in the bank,
Yeah.
and you feel
Yeah.
you feel more. Then it's like, okay, well, now whatever percentage of trust or faith I put into this thing that had so little of beforehand, which delayed it. Now it just seemed to be completely in a new
Right.
category,
Yep.
all on its own.
Yeah. And was there any, so not only did you have like this kind of real struggle with like feeling heard, feeling understood, like this person like was like felt very much like a stranger, you know? And then
Yes.
also like it was expensive. And so it's kind of this double, it's like kind of confirming what you already believe, that maybe therapy's not for you, Ben.
And it felt very like, the only way I could describe it is like, if you imagine having like some dull but chronic pain in like your arm,
Yeah.
and you go to the doctor,
Yeah.
and the doctor's saying, well, describe the pain, and you describe it as best you can, and then they spend an hour just ask you to describe it. And then you feel like, okay, well, that's all that you did. And there was no set of like, okay, here's what we're going to do to address it, or what we're actually going to try to fix it.
And as they asked you more and more questions to describe it, did you feel like they ever got to a place of understanding it fundamentally, or you understood it differently, maybe, or on a deeper level?
No, I did 3 sessions, all with 3 different people.
Oh,
Maybe that's on me,
okay.
but it was very, the first person just wasn't, he even kind of said it himself. He's like, I don't feel like we're going anywhere with it.
Well, that's
Um,
that's a very odd statement. And I've never said that to someone. I've said to people, like I'm really just trying to grasp like what brings you in, and what you're really looking for out of this session. And I've tried to kind of like help sort of draw that out, over time. But that's a very odd question to ask.
What do
Or
you
to say.
what do you suggest somebody like Ben does in this situation, where something that they already were resistant to, they took action on, and it left them feeling more hopeless about it, particularly in your field? What would you suggest for somebody in this situation?
So I think Ben, you need a more like active type of therapy, and so something like cognitive behavioral therapy might be good, and seeing someone where you go in and you learn how to put your thoughts on trial. Um, you know, you're looking at cognitive distortions, like, okay, I have some anxiety here. What are the thoughts around the anxiety? Um, are there black and white thinking in the thoughts? Are there overgeneralization? Like, are you overgeneralizing one experience to all experiences? Are you jumping to conclusions? And then you're trying to like find the most truthful statement, in the midst of that. So something that's a little bit more structured might be helpful for someone like you, Ben. The the other thing I would say, Ben, is next time you're in a therapy session and you start to have these feelings like, hey, I'm feeling like this isn't going anywhere. I would just say that out loud. And I would say a good therapist will actually be appreciative that you're talking about what's going on between us. So, Ben, why don't you try that real quick? How do you feel about my answer? How does it really make you feel?
I mean, it made sense, because for me is like, I think part of why I held off talking to someone for so long was like, I still don't, but I always saw like, oh, you need to go to a therapist, as not a judgmental way, but like, okay, you've experienced sort of trauma. Like, to me, that makes total sense, right? You've been something through crazy or something, whatever. And for me, it was like, well, that's not me, not in a judgmental way, but more of like, well, I've not gone through that. But so it felt a little, it was like there's enough just to push me over the edge to reach out to someone. But then once I was there, it was kind of like, you kind of feel like freshman on your first day of school. You're like, I don't know anyone, where to go, what I'm doing here. And I just felt like I had nothing to. It's hard to start the conversation in that case, because it wasn't like, oh, my parents got divorced and I'm having trouble with, or I'm having specific issues with this, whatever the thing might be. But hearing about needing a more structured, that makes sense to me, because it gives me something to work off of, something to work through, I guess.
You know, and I think it could also be like, could you spend some time before your next therapy session writing down like what you're really like, what is the real struggle, right? And so you might write out like a draft of it, like a page of like really trying to get into the nuts and bolts of, here's the types of thoughts that I have and here's the situations that I have them. And I don't know what to do with these thoughts. When I'm feeling critical of myself, right? It's like, in this situation, I'm blaming myself for maybe something that I shouldn't be blaming myself for, but I don't know why, but that's my go-to. And that's where I'm always at in these situations, right? And tell me if I'm reading your mind right now. But if that's you, like, try to write it out, try to draft out, and then go back to it a couple times. And maybe just start the session by like saying, hey, I wrote something because I wanted to be succinct. I've never done this before. I haven't had, a therapist before, really. And so I'm wondering if you could help me out. Just like hear me read this to you as kind of a starting point, you know?
Mhm.
So, and then see how they respond. But I would say also, when I said like, hey, tell me what you really think. In therapy, I'm not looking for idealizing me or like saying something positive. And so sometimes we normally think that that's what someone is asking for when we ask something like, well, how are you experiencing this interaction between us right now? In a normal sort of polite way, we'd say something positive. But once you get into like a good therapist, I would say like someone who's maybe has some experience with transference and countertransference, and they might be able to, and I hate even saying those words because they might not mean anything to anyone, but people are listening. And um, so if they know how to deal with your response to them, it's both the positive and the negative, and they'll appreciate that. You know what I mean, Bridget? Like, Bridget, do you ever tell your therapist how you feel like towards your therapist, and it might not be positive? Or do you always have positive feelings towards your
Oh,
therapist?
but we have a very unorthodox relationship. I mean, I have the kind of therapist who would be like, that's a bad idea. But we've been seeing each other for we have like a long rapport. So it's not necessarily like we're each walking on eggshells. So I'll tell her she's talking about herself too much, or she'll tell me that like it's not necessarily it's
but
probably
it's fun.
time for a new therapist for me, but she also has what I would call like institutional knowledge about my life and everything, because she's been with me for so long, and that when things do come up, it's very easy for her to identify all of the things that might be, from my past. So it's a balance. But she's European. She's Nordic, so she's very like tells it to me straight. And I just need that. I need someone who's not going to bullshit me and be like, "Tell me." I mean, she will do some of that, but some of it, she's a little bit more like tough love, I think, sometimes. So we have a very open relationship, but she's also always like improving. And I know I like her because she's always trying to better herself and her knowledge. And she's very into like the newest like neuroscience and whatever they're learning about the brain. And she's been doing it a long time. And she is kind of very well versed in addiction. And that's a big, part of the reason that I got sober. Needed her in sobriety. So, yes and no. I would say yes, but I'd also be lying if I said she was like a, traditional therapist.
But there's something playful about a lot of the exchanges, and there's honesty. You're able to tell her though, and this is my point to Ben. If she's talking too much about herself, you tell her that, and she's not like, it doesn't hurt the relationship, right?
No.
So I would define a bad therapist as you tell them something critical about them, and then they respond very poorly back to you.
Yeah.
That is like, that's them not being a good therapist. Like a therapist should be able to handle, like I once had it. Oh gosh, I could get too detailed here, but like early on in one of my therapists, I was like, I think you're giving too much advice to me. And it reminds me of my mom, right? And then I told her a second time that another session, and then I told her a third time, and then by the fourth time, I was just like, I don't think that she hears me. So I was
Yeah.
like, look, like this is the fourth time I'm telling you this. Like this is reminding me of my mom, and she didn't know how to like use that. This was like my first therapist I had. She was a nice lady, but like there was like she didn't know how to use that information therapeutically.
Right.
Like, oh, tell me, like, what was it like when your mom did that? Oh, it must have been so
Therapists are just
awful,
ninjas, just
right?
psychological ninjas.
It's like what's happened between us, I would call now, like in retrospect, looking back at it, was called an enactment. She was becoming more of my mother to me than maybe she would to other patients even. So sometimes as therapists, we get drawn into these like patterns that our patients had when they were young. And so maybe she was becoming like the advice giving mother, like my mother, and she couldn't resist it because it was like, it was part of my stuff that I needed to work through.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, transference and countertransference. That when Jaron was explaining that to me, and just talking about how it's so much of what therapists have to deal with and in their own stuff, that is it's truly very wild stuff, and I don't really know how you do it.
And modern therapists, by the way, some schools only spend like a couple hours talking about it.
That's
like,
crazy. It seems like the most important thing in therapy.
Yeah. Hey,
Right.
very nice to meet you, Ben. Best of
Thank
luck.
you, Ben.
Ben, thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing. It's so hard for me not to be a comedian. Like when he started talking about online therapy, I had to stop myself from being like, this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Like it's like the default in my brain is to want to make a joke when things are getting serious.
Maybe you should. Maybe that's the kind of therapist you would be. I could see that working
No.
for
I
you.
mean, my therapist she's like, the thing I like about you is you like recognize how absurd it all is. So I think we value that in one another. But it is the thing I will end on, and we have to end, is unfortunately, I'm sorry for the people who had their hands raised. I think this will be a topic we will return to because it's such a persistent issue and problem in our society. And I know people I had people texting me through this whole episode. I had someone leave me a voice memo about it. So obviously we've struck some nerve in the past couple of episodes, and I love doing this. I could truly do this all night. I will say so much for me, and it has been about finding the right therapist, finding that relationship, because it's so subjective. And I don't, as much as I think there's therapy is like we've touched on a lot of different aspects of what's gone wrong in therapy. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I do think that it, like I said, I would be lying if it truly saved my life in times when I didn't know how to put one foot in front of the other.
No, it sounds like it's been really important for you. And I think this is where there's nuance, because there are people who are saying like, no, all therapy is bad, all psychiatry is bad, and when I hear them talk, it's very black and white. It's very all or nothing.
You're like, you need therapy.
And I'm like, people who are all black and all white and there's no shades of gray, and it's kind of like they love you or they hate you, and sometimes they go back and forth between those extremes in like 10-minute increments. Those people need help. Yeah, it's miserable.
It's always the people who are yelling the loudest about how they're never quit. That was me. I was like, I'll never quit drinking. People who quit drinking are losers. And then it's like, here I am with 11 years of sobriety.
Just a giant loser.
Just a giant loser. Well, I want to thank all of our guests. Where can we find you and your work? Your podcast is amazing. You and Dr. Shedler are fantastic. I was also laughing in the middle of this because I was thinking I want to use like narcissism in one of my dumpster fire titles to like
Oh,
get the algorithm.
For sure. You should
I'm going to
say,
manipulate it.
oh man. So I would say probably X is one place that I'm active. It's just David Pewter, P as in Paul, U as in under, D as in dragon, E as in elephant, R as in raptor. I chose more masculine.
Wait, what was your
words.
E?
Elephant.
Oh, I thought you said elf. I was like, elf is masculine.
I used to say like the most like I used to be P as in puddle.
P as in yeah,
U as
puppy.
in umbrella. D as in dolphin. Like I'll use like some like
P as in dandelion.
We could do this all night, clearly.
E as in elf. R as in
elf. I just love that. I'm like, elves aren't masculine. I
rain.
feel like Jaron would have something to say about that. We're gonna have to do a Dungeons and Dragons episode with Jaron.
All right, we'll have to put the link to his podcast in the description as well.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a website for your practice and stuff? Or
Yeah,
not?
it's yeah, but I would say, let's see.
We'll just put it in the
If
description.
you just Google me, David Pewter, you'll find it.
Okay. All right. Thank you for coming. We'll have you back again. This was so fun and enlightening.
It's fun. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
There.
Thank you all for being here. I appreciate all of you for coming. Thank you to our guest, Dr. David Pewter. Thank you to those of you who showed up and asked questions. Thank you to Two Way and their amazing team for making this happen. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Bridget.
And thank you, Quest, for sponsoring this show. Visit questhealth.com and use the discount code REALMAY25 and get 20% off your purchase. That's questhealth.com, code REALMAY25 for 20% off. Support the people who support this show. Join us next Wednesday, June 25th at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're talking about our love of America in advance of July 4th, the actual No King's Day. No, we're going to be talking about what we love about America. So I want to hear from you. It's going to be a love fest for America. This is real America. We want to hear from people and what is, we hear a lot of like, oh, America, wah. And I want to hear let's bathe this country in positivity. If you're with us on the Zoom, it's the same link every time. Thank you for getting real with me, guys. I'm Bridget Fetisi. Don't forget to tip your server.